This episode is brought to you by the supporters of 40 Watt Podcast over on Patreon. Go over to patreon.com/40watt podcast, where for as little as $3 per month, you can help support the podcast and get every episode ad-free. For $5 a month, you'll get every episode ad-free, as well as a bonus episode every week. I can't overstate how thankful I am for the support of my patrons, and hope you'll consider joining the team and helping keep this show on the road. Welcome to episode 2, season 5, 40 Watt Podcast. My name is Philip. I'm your host. Thank you for joining us this week. I'm very excited to get into this interview with Rick Matthews from Matthews Effects. We talk about all kinds of things, his journey to his new technician pedal, sort of rebranding, sort of like how he got into this. And we get into food. We get into Nashville hot chicken. We get into all sorts of things. And I know you're going to love this chat. I don't hope, I know. But first, before we get started, we have to cover a few things here at the front end. First of all, thank you so much to my Patreon supporters who go out of their way to make sure that this show is still happening. I am so appreciative of you and your support. There have been some changes to the Patreon this year. There's one level, only one. There's $5 a month. I have unpublished the other levels. So those of you that are at the other levels, you're still there. Feel free to stay where you are, or if you want to switch over to the $5 level, that's great. Nothing's going to change for you. But for new Patreon supporters, $5 a month gets you an extra episode every week that this podcast goes out. Also, by now, you've listened to the first episode with Jason Mays, new co-host on every other episode. We think that's the way it's going to work out. We'll see. Also, want to thank sponsors of this podcast. First of all, Barry, Grez Guitars. Go check them out. I've been playing my Grez Grand Tour that, if you're watching this on YouTube, is above my head. It's the best guitar I've ever owned. That's bar none. It is such a joy to play. I have a couple of other Barry's guitars. I think he makes some of the best guitars out there today, and I don't think he charges enough for them. They're expensive. I get it. I think they're worth every penny and more. Go over to grezguitars.com. Check out his Instagram. You can see all sorts of videos and explanations of how he builds things, and it's just a great follow. Additionally, I want to thank sponsor of this podcast, Summer School Electronics. Mark is making some of the most fun pedals. Y'all, I'm a dyed-in-the-wool blues guy, and I love his pedals, and some of them are a little more grungy, things like the Trash Panda and the Class Reunion, but he also makes the Extra Credit Boost, which I love, that I really need to get a video out on, and I'm going to do that one of these days. But thanks for your support. Thanks for coming and listening to the show. If you're a listener of the show, it would mean a whole lot to me if you'd go over to YouTube and subscribe to the YouTube page. If you are a YouTube subscriber, and you watch these on YouTube, if you want to go over and find the podcast on your favorite podcast player, that would mean a lot to me too. Make sure you leave a review, rating, comment on the videos. All those are free ways that you can help grow this podcast and help others find it. And in the meantime, y'all, let's get on with the podcast. Thanks for joining us. Ladies and gentlemen, 40 Watters, welcome back. Season 5. Sorry, I had trouble counting there. Y'all, we're in 5. I'm a musician. I only count to 4, so we're now into uncharted territory. Season 5, episode 2. Welcome to the show. You've already heard all the preamble at the very beginning, so I don't have to do it all over again. So this week, I have Rick Matthews from Matthews Effects. Rick, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing really well. It's been an interesting time at work. This right now. But listeners, we're doing inventory at work, and it's an awful experience. I know none of you really care, but most of y'all know I'm a librarian. Well, inventory in a public library means you have to scan every single item in the library.
Yeah, determine what's missing.
Yeah, exactly. To determine what's missing. And it is awful. Anyway.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I think our collection is something along the lines of 80,000 items, and we're a small library, so every single item has to get scanned. So we do it every 5 years. Thankfully, it's not an annual event. But Rick, I've been wanting to get you on for a while. We got connected, man, it's got to be a couple of years ago now.
Yeah.
through our mutual friend Blake Wyland, and
A
at the
legend.
time, I had an idea for a utility pedal,
Mm-hmm.
and I was decided I wanted to try to build it, and I asked Blake if he knew anybody who would be the person to talk to do this, because I listeners, I'll tell you what it was, because at this point it doesn't matter, because I found out that it already existed. I thought no one was making this. I wanted to make a multi-expression controller so that one expression pedal could be used to control multiple pedals, and as you swapped which pedal it was controlling, it would remember your setting, and you could do it that way. Turns out, of course, Mission Engineering already makes that, and
Yeah.
I don't know how I missed it, because I did search for it,
Yeah.
but you gave me so much of your time, to the point that you wrote out essentially a syllabus of
Oh.
things I needed to learn in order to do it. It was the most impressive thing, because you said, okay, first you need to know how to do this, and then you're going to want to learn how to do this, and like, I don't even remember all the terms now at this point.
Yeah.
Then you're going to want to get into the digital side of things and code, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh
So
man, yeah. I remember some of it, but yeah, I think at the time I was just coming out the other side of like doing a bunch of learning myself for like specific development. So I was like, I know exactly like step by step what you need to do structure wise to get there. Um, but also the same thing, like that's happened so often where you're like, oh, this is such a cool idea, and you get really excited about it, and then you start Googling and you're like, dang it, someone beat me to it. Someone already came up with it, or they're already doing it. So that definitely happens a lot.
yeah, that's the part that it's why I affectionately refer to on this show pedal builders as lunatics. You're
Mm.
all lunatics, because I feel like you have to be just a little insane to go into, first of all, a market or a place where there's so many other people doing it,
Mm.
and there is so much saturation at like the approachable level of it. If
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
all of your typical fuzzes and drives and your
Yeah.
base level tremolos and phasers and all that kind of stuff, there's this big, the way I visualize it, there's this block in the center that's like core effects, and there are hundreds, if not thousands, of people
Yeah. Yeah.
making those things.
The thing with that is that there's so many people making them, but it's also so accessible to make those also, right? Like
Right.
obviously the stuff that like Chase Bliss and Maris is doing, like everyone loves reverb, everyone loves delay, but it's a lot harder to make a reverb and delay. So there's less people, not everyone, like how I started, not everyone making pedals in their basement can just jump in necessarily to make
Right.
those. So those core things end up being a lot more saturated and a lot harder to stand out. And, that's kind of why we've kind of shifted away from those, just because, not because I don't have like cool ideas or like cool things we can do in that space, but it kind of just comes back to like, if I'm really personally interested in it, then I'm like, yeah, let's make this, and we'll, at worst case, it'll be like a small batch or something like that. But like, then from like a business standpoint, it's like I'm never gonna outsell Keeley or JHS
Right.
or any of those guys with like an overdrive pedal, right? So that's why we've kind of just moved towards the digital space of that type of stuff, where like we can do really cool, interesting things, but there's a little bit less competition. There's a higher bar to entry. Um, and I've been having a ton of fun in that kind of space developing lately.
And I think that really brings us. That's a great sort of gateway into a couple of different conversations, because I feel like by now listeners have already heard me talk about over on probably over on Gear Nerds, where we talked about Guitar Nerds, Gear Nerds. That's another podcast, probably. Guitar Nerds, where we talked about effects pedals that came out last year, and I talked a whole lot about your technician. But before we get into that, because we're going to get really into that, because
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting how you've stripped your line back, and you're like, you've got this new direction that's really intense.
Yeah.
But first of all, what's the story? How'd you get into music? How'd you get into guitar? How'd you get into building pedals?
Man. I was that kind of classic, like there would always be stories my parents would tell and stuff like that of like as a baby, like always wanting to play guitar. Like when I was a real little kid, my dad was like a pastor of a church, and I would like get a stick and like try to get up on stage and like try to play guitar. And so that kind of natural progression is how I started, was like in youth groups. Like I was in
Hmm.
a youth group and they were like, we need people for the team, like who plays guitar? And I was like, oh, I'll do it. And then I didn't know anything though. Like I did not know anything. And I just faked my way through it, and I would like learn the chords for that week. I would do my best. And then, so self-taught the entire time from that perspective of just like teaching myself what I needed to know to accomplish what I was trying to do at the time. Um, which now, on a side note, like I'm really excited this year. I'm gonna like dive into like getting some like high end lessons, hopefully, like
Oh,
really
nice.
kind of fill those gaps. This is the stuff you
Yeah.
miss when you're self teaching. You don't, necessarily pick up on.
I'll tell you, just because listeners, at least my long term listeners, will have heard last week's episode where I talked about one of my goals this year is skill building instead of
Mm,
like gear acquisition.
yeah.
Like, and I have a music degree. I have
Mm,
a dual degree in music and audio engineering, and even having had that schooled background playing in organized ensembles where they put sheet music that I
yeah.
badly read in front of me, um, I still feel that's very same thing. It's like I still feel like I learned enough skill to get me through the scenarios I was in. So
Yeah.
I'm taking lessons again
Yeah.
starting next month
Dude,
actually.
that's awesome. Yeah. Same thing. I mean, to a different degree. I didn't
Yeah.
go up to like college level, but like
Yeah.
I was super in band, in high school and in middle school, and I was doing saxophone. And so like, but it is like a muscle, like all that stuff, like as soon as you stop using it, really starts to fade away.
Yeah.
Especially, I feel like I've super replaced that like information with like, I have tons of like, oh, I remember this specific chip model, which can do like this specific thing. And like, and so I'm like, all right, I need to get rid of some of that information, refill in with musical theory and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so I started playing with that, and then like playing bands in high school, the kind of general thing. I was just always really obsessed with gear, like super big gearhead. I loved gear. I loved pedals, amps, just that whole aspect of it. And so thinking through, like, so there came a point where like I wanted to be a part of the industry. I didn't know how. I was always like really entrepreneurial minded, wanted to start a business, but didn't really know what I wanted to do. And then a company moved to my town called buildyourown.clone.com,
Okay. Yeah.
BYOC, like OGs in the pedal kit market. Like they were around for forever. They unfortunately closed shop in the last 6 months. I think they kind of shut down, which was super sad. But that really gave me my start. So Keith, the owner, like again, I was like, yeah, no, I'm totally qualified for this job. I could totally do it. Didn't really know how to solder, but just had that like ambition and like excitement to learn. So he really like taught me how to solder and like gave me a really good foundational understanding of things while I was working there. And then it just kind of got to a point where I was like, I want to do my own thing. Like, is that cool if I start, like, I know I'm working for you, but can I like start doing this? And he's doing kits, and I was wanting to do like products that I would launch. So there was no conflict, and he was super encouraging and like helped me out. Um, and so yeah, that's how I kind of got into the gear part of it. And there's like a bunch of other stuff that happened when I started the company, but yeah, that's kind of the short, I guess, of how I started playing guitar and got into gear
Yeah.
making.
That's an interesting route, and I love that the whole story of just say yes and then figure it out.
Yeah.
I've had at least one musician, and I love this story. And I don't think I don't think he told it on my podcast when he was on. I think he told it on another. But I've had Joey Landreth on before in the
Mm.
past, and Joey Landreth talked about getting a gig with. I think he was on the road, and if I listeners, if I get like the details of the story wrong, I'm sorry, because it's been a while. Slept so many times since then. But I think they were looking for a guitarist for a leg of the tour for Toby Keith,
Mm.
and Joey had been playing with some other folks, and so they recommended him, and like he got the gig, and then they said, "Oh yeah, you play dobro, right?" He said, "Yeah, absolutely." And then at the end of it, he was like, "I had never touched a dobro. I had to go buy one
Yeah.
that day. Like obviously it's Joey Landreth. He plays slide. He could figure it out,
He
right?
could figure it out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. But I love that idea of the opportunity. You just say yes, and if you fail,
Yeah.
you fail. But if you don't, this is a great way to get into it. Trial by
Yeah.
fire and all that.
It's definitely like that mentality works a lot with business too. Like everyone deals with like imposter syndrome and like, do I really charge for this and that? But that whole, to a degree, of fake it till you make it is like a real thing. Like you got to jump in and just like do it if you're gonna get there.
Yeah, and just to relate a little bit, even like starting this podcast when I started it
Yeah,
now 4.5 years ago, it was I still remember there was one of those inspirational memes that passes around Facebook or Instagram or whatever social media was there at the time, and it was just one of those. It's like. The first song you record is going to suck. The first podcast you record is going to suck. The first thing you build is going to suck. Do it anyway.
yeah,
That was when I was like, oh, I'm going to suck at this and that's okay.
yeah.
And here I am still being awful at it, but I'm doing it anyway.
I
Um,
know exactly what you mean. Same for
yeah,
me. Yeah,
love doing it. So, uh, as you moved into building, you've built, I mean, I regretfully have not actually played any of your pedals at this point,
yeah,
but I've started to get into them, and I got really excited when the Technician came out. But I did notice your line, your offering has stripped way back from you had much more offerings out there, and I think it has something to do with what you were saying about trying to really channel and um, focus in on these areas you're really excited about and kind of like going outside that center block of those
yeah.
very fundamental things until you finally landed on the botanist, which is I'm going to try to remember chorus phaser flange
Course phaser tremolo.
tremolo. That's it.
Yeah,
Yeah. And so you've
yeah,
got that, and then you've got what was the coolest pedal I think that launched last year, as I talked about on Guitar Nerds, the Technician, which has a tagline underneath it that I can't even remember all the words, but
yeah. Dual channel auditory manipulator, I think, is
that's
what we
it.
ended up on. Yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah,
let's talk about that and how you ended up in this place, because that's a really ambitious pedal. Um,
yeah,
not
yeah.
not that your ones before weren't kind of ambitious, including the original Technician, which I believe was just a really deep reverb.
Yeah, the original Technician was the Astronomer and the Cosmonaut in one.
Okay.
So we had already launched the Cosmonaut and the Astronomer at that point. They were kind of established, and we were like, oh, well, what if we do like this double pedal type thing? And originally that was the dual reverb. We just called it like, oh, it's the dual reverb. And then we're like, okay, well, we should. People really liked it. We should come up with a model name. So then we named it the Technician. We only did so many of those,
Hmm.
and then the original concept for this felt like, oh, that would be such a cool kind of connection back to kind of what we did in the past for this, and then it kind of just took on its own life to where it's doing even more crazy stuff than like the original Technician did.
Yeah, and the way I described it to someone recently, and forgive the comparisons, we're in an industry full of comparisons. So, and I was trying to describe it to someone because they wanted to know why I was getting excited about it, and
Hmm.
I was like, it's like if uh the offerings of Chase Bliss had a baby with the hologram chroma console in a little bit of a way. I
Yeah,
don't know, for some reason they live in the same space in my head. Um, So, I mean, it's true stereo. It's stereo
yeah,
expression, MIDI. Let's talk a little bit about what it does, because I
yeah,
want to understand exactly what's going on there. This is for me,
yeah.
listeners. Sorry.
And I think it's also super fair. Like whatever you're talking about, whether it's music or products like this, um, like you have to acknowledge kind of the people who have inspired. Like you can't deny that like hologram obviously has had like a huge impact on the industry, and
Yeah.
Chase Bliss obviously has had a huge impact on the industry. I think for me it was even though I've never played the microcosm, I've never had the opportunity to play the mood specifically,
Uh huh.
but like you can see kind of like their influences obviously like in terms of like how the Technician ended up being. Um, I think for me it was like how can we do something in that space that isn't specifically just doing what they've done. Where's an opportunity where we can do our own thing?
Yeah.
But I just love that kind of space so much of like ambient soundscape generation. And so, yeah, so the original concept was let's make um, a delay pedal and a reverb pedal in one. That was the only concept. It was just going to have delay and reverb at the same time. And originally, like going into it, like the concept was like, oh, it's going to have an analog delay and it's going to have a digital delay and it's going to have a tape style delay and it's going to have, and I got to a certain point where I felt like we were like, Boss has already done that.
Right.
Strymon's already done that. Like all these brands have already done that. And they've done it really, really well. Like, why would someone want to play or buy ours over theirs when we're all emulating, trying to emulate the same stuff? So then I hate describing it this way, but I feel like it is kind of accurate. Like then it became a thing of like, okay, because also I was really new to like writing this kind of DSP, so
Right.
it became this thing of like, let's explore and kind of let the product um, tell us what it should be. It sounds so lame, but like it was a lot of just like exploring down different avenues, like of ideas of, well, maybe let's try this, and like seeing how that sounded and being like, that was a cool idea, but that didn't really work. Or like, oh, like I really wanted to do granular, but I'd never written a granular algorithm before. So like we went down that path and we were like, oh, okay, like that's really cool. I really like that. And so we got the delay and reverb kind of sitting pretty well how I like them, but we had like these extra two knobs and a toggle that were like, oh, we haven't really like filled those in. And so it was a late entry that I actually decided like, oh, let's just put a looper in there.
Yeah.
Like we have that functionality, we have that space, we have like the processing power and everything like that. So then I went down that whole rabbit hole of like designing the looper and what you could do with the looper and adding that to the overall package. And so yeah, we ended up with a pedal that has a full delay engine, full reverb engine, full filter engine, and then a full looper engine. And those are also independent for the left and the right. So you can have reverse delay on the right and digital delay on the left, or you can have reverb on the right and no reverb on the left, or any combination of those things. That was kind of the concept. That was super fun. And then to kind of like, there's so much I could like talk. I
Yeah.
don't want to like overly describe everything, but one of the coolest things for me that I really liked with the way that I play, which is most often mono,
Okay.
is like it's kind of not as exciting when you get a stereo pedal and you run mono, because you're like, well, that didn't do anything for me. So what I also did was I made a mode that I'm calling parallel mono, where your mono signal comes in, it gets split to both independent engines, and then it gets resummed for a mono output. So even
Oh
if you're
yeah.
running mono, you don't have to have a separate pedal that sums the outputs. You can just run parallel mono and still have, granular delay on the right and digital delay on the left, and they get summed together at the output. So just doing stuff like that, where I saw like that maybe, and maybe other people have done that, but like for me in my own knowledge of things, like where could we do things that were interesting and unique and that like other people aren't doing? Where's the opportunity basically?
Yeah.
And that's kind
That's
of what happened.
that's really really cool. So I know you use delay as an example. So theoretically, could I do dual parallel reverbs as well? Is there a way to
Yeah.
split that engine? See,
Yeah, so
that's
all
so
four
cool.
engines are parallel. So you can, and the looper is stereo as well. So you can record a loop and have it running at one speed on the left and a different speed on the right if you want to do like some crazy stuff. Um, and like it's been a growing experience. Like this level of product is the
Mhm.
first one. Like it's so technically advanced, like there's so much stuff going on. There's like been some growing pains where like of just like understanding where's the line of like giving the user tons of functionality but not leaving you stuck in a place where you're lost. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So they're like,
There are a lot of pedals that do that to me. They're so feature laden that at some
yeah,
point I go, I don't have the time or
yeah.
mental space to figure this out.
Because from the engineering standpoint, it's like, oh, isn't it so cool that you can do this? And then people are like, yeah, but I don't know how to do, like, I don't understand the dampening, how to like dial that in right. So it's been really important for me that we listen to the community feedback and like how people are using it, where our blind spots might be, and then just keep pushing firmware updates where we just kind of tweak stuff, we update stuff, and then we continue to add new functionality. There was like things I wanted to include that like timing wise we just couldn't fit in. And
Yeah.
so I was like, well, like let's just put it on like a schedule where ever so often we're adding more functionality, especially if it's something customers say they want and we didn't really think of it, or we
Yeah.
didn't think they would want it. And now they're saying like, oh, we should do that. And we're like, okay, easy. It's a firmware update. You plug it in USB, you're good to go.
I love that idea. A couple of reasons. So, literally, as we're recording, listeners, this morning, That Pedal Show put out an episode that's all about parallel reverbs
Mm,
because they had heard about how the guy who produced and engineered Grace by Jeff Buckley, that's how he got that guitar sound on that record, is parallel reverbs.
yeah.
I think it's actually 3 parallel reverbs.
Oh, yeah.
And I listened to a little bit of that this morning in headphones while I was doing inventory. And yeah, it is an extremely cool sound,
It's
and
very cool.
to be able to do that in stereo, I mean in parallel, where one reverb is not just overpowering or feeding into the other and altering it entirely and having it happen separately and then summed, totally different sound. I knew it
Yeah.
was different from my audio engineering days, but in the early 2000s and when I was working on this degree, there weren't exactly a lot of people audio engineering these massive reverb soundscapes, even
Yeah.
through like bus and aux sends. But um, something like this, from the time you decide, okay, we're going to do a dual pedal reverb and delay to release day, how long
Yeah.
did that take you?
So, okay. So there's one number. So it technically the project took 2 years.
Okay.
And that was me hitting a point where I was kind of at a point where I was like, I don't know. We're not seeing the growth in the company that I would hope for. And I'm heading towards my mid 30s, and there was a little bit of like, do I want to grind forever? Like, where am I going? Like, I feel like I'm not advancing or innovating or like bringing new things. And I was talking to another company owner, and he just kind of really encouraged me, and I kind of just hit it. I was like, all right, well, I really should commit. Like, this is kind of my last swing. Let's just commit and do this, and then if it doesn't work out, then I feel like I've tried everything. I can feel good about my time in the industry, and if it goes well, then that means like I can keep exploring this, keep developing, keep like investing in this life, right? And so from that point, which I knew how to code because we had been coding stuff, I had been like doing projects with coding. I knew how to code, but I didn't know how to do DSP. I didn't
Right.
know how to do DSP, and at the time, I didn't really understand how do you take a analog signal, convert it to numbers, and then convert it back to an analog signal. There's just kind of like that wall I hadn't gone over yet. So that took me about a year to learn how to the fundamentals of DSP coding and like what that meant, and then also to design and get a physical dev board going that like converted the signal 24-bit 48 kilohertz, got all that working and running. And then it took me another year to actually write the algorithms, all the control software to manage all the buttons and switches and everything, do all the testing and everything like that. So it was a 2-year process for everything, at least.
That's a lot of dedication to figuring this out. Now,
Yeah.
don't get me wrong. A lot of those are skills that are now transferable to new projects
Yeah.
in the future. So
Yeah.
you did the hard work to make future work easier.
Yeah.
So you said something earlier when you added the looper that I'm really
Mm.
curious about. You said that you had these controls you weren't really doing anything with. In your head, had you already sort of designed the physical aspect of it? You knew there'd be knobs and switches and stuff like that, but you're like, oh, we didn't have anything on them yet.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Yeah, I came up with the aesthetic layout of the controls generally
Mhm.
before we got to final coding.
Okay.
So I knew that there was 8 knobs. I knew that there was 4 toggles. The thing with that is originally the toggles were toggles, like they were physical toggles.
Yeah.
Um, but the reason why I changed it to the light up toggles was I didn't like, for me personally, and this project, I didn't like not knowing when you jumped presets what option you had selected. So
Okay.
by having the LEDs, they change color. So you can tell, oh, on this preset, I'm using this delay algorithm. On this preset, I'm using this reverb algorithm. So it gave you a little bit more information to the user.
Gotcha.
And so that's what led me down the rabbit hole of using those toggles. But yeah, I had that generally figured out probably at that year point. So a year in, I had come up with this is going to be the layout, but I don't know what everything's going to do yet. I know we'll have this many knobs, but I don't know what they'll do.
I love that the care of aesthetics, because
Yeah.
there's a whole segment of players and listeners. If you are that player, I totally get it. Who you don't care what it looks like, you don't care how it's designed, you just need it to work. I've seen you. I believe me, I've seen you in the gritty blues bars and country bars that I have played over the years. I know who you are, and I totally get it. But then there's the other side that's like, I want it to look great and to
Yeah.
understand it. I'm somewhere in the middle, and I love that you use those push button LED toggles. My first experience with them were on the Chase Bliss CXM.
I think
Uh,
most people
yeah.
would say the same thing. Which, funny enough, because I know Joel, I
Mhm.
messaged him and was like, "Hey, how do you feel about this?" And he gave me the green light. So
Yeah. Well, and I think they're great. And what I learned on that pedal was that when changing presets,
mm,
I on any pedal that has that much power and that many options, I love the fact that when I change presets, it visually shows me exactly what's happening. I
yeah,
don't have to guess, because I have a lot of pedals that have presets. Well, not a lot anymore, because I've tried to keep it to a minimal insanity around here. But pedals that do have a flip switch toggle for something,
mm,
but when you go to a preset, that physical switch doesn't change
yeah,
magically. And
yeah,
so who knows what it was. If you need to then adjust it on the fly,
yeah,
you don't know
yeah.
what it was.
It also really helps for what we're doing, which is the second layer of controls.
Mhm.
So then, even more so, to have that second layer of toggles representing different things is really helpful when you switch over to that and the colors change, and you can tell, oh, my effect order is this way and my whatever is this way, and then when you switch back you can be like, oh yeah, no, I was on this delay algorithm. So yeah, it's just anything like that that gives information, I think, is just super helpful.
Yeah. I think that's really smart. I think it's really, um if not innovative, because it isn't exactly the first, but
Yeah,
it
we're
is.
definitely not the first to do it.
Yeah, definitely it's on that fringe of the outside of, there aren't many people doing this level of, and I think it's
Yeah,
an interesting departure from things you've made in the past, because the botanist, for example, that's still available,
yeah,
it almost seems pedestrian by
yeah,
comparison, you know.
yeah, yeah. And there probably was a degree of like, when you go into this type of design and coding and stuff like that, you literally can do anything.
Yeah.
So I might have gone a little crazy because I had so much like, oh, usually I'm the type of guy who's like, oh, big ideas, big ideas. All right, but what can we actually do? And there was
Yeah.
no like, what can we actually do? It was just, oh yeah, we literally can do all those things. Let's shove them all inside of a box. And I think also on the toggles, like, I tried to find other options that could give that same type of feedback, but
Uh-huh.
there's just not really like there's not anything else that can do it in the same way. Because if I could have found something different, I definitely would have done it from an aesthetic perspective.
Yeah.
But I love how it turned out. Like they are just, it's super cool. The lights, the LED. I mean, you can't go wrong with like RGB lights happening on your pedal board.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's pretty cool.
And I feel like it's really hard to get that kind of feedback and that kind of information without an LED screen.
Yeah, I mean that would be the only other way to go would be to go full like screen display.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I'm burnt out on screen displays.
I would say that was the only thing that kind of tempered design stuff was like, if we're not using a screen, it needs to be accessible. You need to be able to at least somewhat quickly be able to understand what's going on in the product.
Yeah.
And so I tried to design it from a 3-level perspective, which is like level 1, you're only using the knobs on page 1, which are the default knobs that come up. And that has your delay time, your mix, your reverb mix, the most important things. Like you can completely use it like that and be happy. And then there's like the next level of user who's going to go to that second page and they're going to change the effect order and they're going to add modulation and do all of that stuff. And they're going to go that far and be happy. And then the third layer is the one who's going to completely dial in the left and right completely different and like go super deep into tweaking and modulating everything. So that it's not like, because everyone's had that experience where there's a screen and you're diving into menus and you're not that type of user. Is not a great experience. People write that off instantly.
Yeah,
so.
and then suddenly that pedal isn't for you, even if there were some amazing sounds in there that could have worked for you. Yeah. But now you're like, I can't go into these menus. Look, I'm looking at you, boss.
Something else along those lines. I really wanted. I keep saying we. It's really just me. But
I say we for the podcast, and it's just me.
The royal we.
Yeah.
I really wanted for launch, and it didn't end up because launch went great, and I ended up getting super busy, and I couldn't do it how I originally planned it. The original concept, which is coming soon, is we do weekly content. So we'll have a weekly video of like, this is this sound, right? Which is part of normal marketing, right? Like everybody does that. Like, here's a cool sound for the product. But since we have that USB functionality, you'll be able to just load that sound instantly to the pedal, because it became very apparent early on when we're doing the manual and stuff like that. Like traditionally you would have, set these knobs to these positions and you get this factory sound, right?
Yeah.
With the amount of knobs there are and options, it was like, that's going to be a bad experience trying to explain that to someone, to set all those knobs in just the right way. So the ability to create presets ongoing and then just push them out to people where they don't have to tweak anything, it's just instantly good, is something I'm really excited about for us doing.
Yeah, I love that concept. I get a little frustrated with pedals that have so many options and then there's no way to save a preset. In fact, I told Angelo and Terry at Maris about the Enzo. Like that was like an issue for me with the Enzo. I was like, I could get a cool sound, but I'd never get back to it.
Right.
If a single knob got turned, I would never find my way back. Yeah. I need presets so I can instantly get back that thing that I really, really liked. Because I'm not a user who is going to. I'm not a big deep diver. I need it to sound good from the jump. I'll do a little bit of tweaking, just a little bit, but ultimately I need it to be easy for me to get to something I really enjoy playing. Otherwise I'm going to lose interest really, really quickly.
Yeah.
This podcast is supported in part by Stringjoy Strings. I'm a snob. At least that's what people tell me. I'm never okay with good enough, and that's where Stringjoy Strings come in. They're better than good enough. They're the best. Stringjoy are making some of the finest strings available today right up the road from me in Nashville, Tennessee. They offer custom sets, balanced tension, coated strings, the works. If you need it, they can probably make it happen. You should be using Stringjoy Strings, and if you're going to order from them, you really could help this podcast out by clicking the affiliate link down in the description or show notes below. You get amazing strings, I get a little bit of that back to help the show keep going. It's a win-win situation. Get your Stringjoy Strings today.
Yeah, totally. And I think for me, at least, I even oscillate between the two, where 70% of the time, yeah, I just want to jump into something really fast. But then also you have nights where you're like, you know what? I don't have anything to do. I got the whole night. Let's make some madness and then dive in and go crazy,
Yeah.
Um, and so both of those working well, I think, is really important to a good product.
Yeah, I agree. So moving forward. So I was sorry, I had a whole moment like
Yeah.
full on ADHD train wreck in my brain as like four things converged. So how you talked about the launch.
Yeah.
How has the launch gone? I'm really curious
Yeah.
because, it came out last year. It felt like there was a lot of stuff that came out last year.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it went really good. It was one of those things that, like, ironically, everything went wrong, but it went really well. Like, we had like a bunch of content slated, and like with third-party demo people, and like some like stuff came up and happened, and like those didn't work out. So really, we launched with just our demo video, and we were like, you know what? It is what it is. Like, we'll just, if we sell 10 to 20, we'll be happy. You know what I mean? Like, just go low in expectations and just like be positive about the whole thing. And we ended up selling out in like a week and a half, which was really awesome for us.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. But that was also, humbly not what we expected. We expected maybe to, because it's hard to know when, like, traditionally this is the most expensive product we've ever launched.
Right.
So that perspective of like, yeah, we know how much we sell of like other pedals, but like we don't know what we will sell at this price point, right? Like, is our customer base not gonna connect with something priced at that? Is the general industry not going to connect with it? There's just so much unknown. So we tried to really temper our own expectations of just like, what's the bare minimum we need to do to be happy or successful.
Well, I was going to say, not only the price though, but this is also, as far as I'm aware, and I think based on the conversation, it's accurate. It's the most advanced, most feature laden. There's a lot of things there that make you go, but how into it are people going to be?
Yeah. There was a lot of unknown questions, so we just really didn't know how it was going to go. Is it going to be a slow burn where people catch on over time, or So we went in just trying to have fun and be positive about it, enjoy everything. But then also, because of that, we also weren't super because I'm pretty much a one-man shop right now.
Yeah.
That was then like, oh, we have all these orders. I need to like finish building everything and like get everything shipped and like do all of that. So it was kind of like a launch, and then like there wasn't a ton of like more content. Like, I wasn't super active on social because I was just grinding, trying to get like everything shipped and like take care of that before I tried to sell more. Right.
Yeah.
And then also because of the timing, like we had some delays with getting stuff in for batch 2. We were like, oh, okay, we need to get like batch 2 going. And that had some delays. So like we're just now about to have units for batch 2 finally here in January, which will be really exciting. But yeah, so it was a good launch, but it was a crazy launch. We have new third-party content. We're sending units out, so we're still going to be doing those. Hopefully like 2 to 3 demos every month, I think, for the next year.
Oh, that's
just
awesome.
Kind of like because we're going to be, like I was saying, like we're going to be adding new features and new like updates and stuff like that. So why not just have like steady, push instead of just having like a bunch just on launch day. Like, there's so much we want to do with this product beyond what it was when we started. Let's just do like a consistent journey that everyone's going to kind of come along with us for, and just kind of see how everything goes.
I love that, especially because the whole build of this, the whole concept of this pedal, the whole build, everything feels like a journey to begin with. So it just feels like it's a content continuation of that. That word did not want to come to me.
Yeah.
So now that you've seen the success of this, I'm real curious.
Yeah.
And as you're getting ready for batch 2 and get those out, this form factor, this style, is this something you're thinking about other things later down the line? Obviously you can't say entirely, or is it something where you go, this is really awesome, this was a lot, and I think I might dial it back just a step or two in the future.
Yeah, no, the kind of the idea from the beginning, because what's cool about, and maybe this is a secret people don't really think about, but like any brand that has like a form factor, usually what you can do is you develop the form factor and then all you really have to do is change the code. Like
Right.
the physicalness doesn't change. You're just changing the code and the artwork and the labels, and you have a whole nother product. So I actually teased out like yesterday or maybe the day before, like I'm just officially starting coding for the next thing in this form factor, which I see. I have a list of running ideas for products. Some of them are this form factor, some aren't.
Yeah.
But for this form factor, I easily see this being at least 4 to 5 products.
Oh, wow.
Which then I could see by the time we get to those having more ideas in this form factor. And maybe some that don't use the same hardware, right? Like there was a really strong response, which I didn't expect, because I teased my community of like, what would you want to see next in this form factor? And surprisingly, overwhelmingly, people were like, gain. We want something gain in this form factor. Which I was like, okay, well, I have some maybe that is a reason to do another gain product, because I have some like cool ideas we could do in that form factor, fully programmable. I won't go too deep, but like there's some cool stuff we could do there.
Well,
and then I have like really cool other ideas. The one I'm just starting coding, I'm like really excited about. I think it will be really cool. And yeah, we'll just kind of see if it feels appropriate. We'll do a product in that form factor. I have like other stuff kind of like I was talking about I want to do also. So we'll just kind of see how things kind of roll out.
I think the gain one is interesting because as someone who is a complete and utter boomer in a millennial's body, and understands that like I'm a dirt and fuzz into a tube amp guy. That's just who I am. Not that I don't love reverb and delay and modulation and getting really kind of out there with it, because I do. I really do. But in the music I've spent most of my life playing, whether in bands or my own stuff I'm creating, it's been kind of meat and potatoes. And I know the rep that digital gain has, and I know people don't think very well of it in general, but I feel like I have felt that tide shift a little bit.
Yeah.
And you look at the success. Now, granted, it is analog with digital control, something like the Preamp Mark II. I feel like the Strymon pedals were sort of, even though they're still kind of underrated in my opinion, the gain pedals, the Sunset and the Boulevard,
Riverside.
That's it. Riverside. That's it. I don't know where Boulevard came from.
It's kind of
sure. We're actually recording on a platform called Riverside. I should have gotten that one. That's right there in front of me. They were great gain pedals, digital, and sounded good. We've come a long way from the digital attempts at gain in the 90s. We've come a long, long way since those.
Yeah.
So I feel like something in this form factor for gain, there's a big there's a place for that because there aren't many things filling that gap.
Yeah, I think, man, that's such a whole specific specialization in the realm of DSP that I think is really interesting. I think in terms of gain, like the ideas I have is more the like digitally controlled analog.
Okay.
But I do 100% agree with you. I mean, I think if you look at kind of the direction that Tone X1 is pushing, I think that is a real clear indication of what we're going to see over the next 5 to 10 years, which is here's one pedal and it can digitally recreate all these different gain pedals. You don't have to choose one, right? Like you can get them all. And just using that as a gain product and not an amp, amp, whatever.
Capture thing.
Yeah, not using it for your amp, but just using it to add gain, different flavors of gain into your chain. I think that's going to totally be a direction we see a lot of development on over the next, so many years.
Yeah, I love
Yeah.
that idea, and I think we're getting closer and closer to it, because even as a dyed in the wool amp guy, and I'm gonna carry that banner for absolutely as long as I possibly can. I understand that the tides are shifting a little bit, and there's going to be a place where there's more and more room for getting the sound right in a convenient and flexible, versatile package.
Yeah.
And I do think Tone X. We talked about Tone X1 on Gear of the Year as well.
Mm.
It was a disruptor. It was a major market disruptor. It
Yeah.
changed a lot of people's view on a lot of things.
Yeah.
So really
Yeah.
excited to see that.
I'm currently, I mean, I'm a little behind, but I listed my Tone X to sell it, and to snag 2 Tone X1s to run
Oh,
stereo
really?
amps. Yeah. I'm doing a new board build, and I'm trying to figure out. I don't think anyone makes it, so I think I might have to make it myself. But essentially, the way I run my board is I run gain to amp or amps
Mm-hmm.
to wet effects, and then out.
Yeah.
Right. So that's normally how I do it, kind of like an effect loop kind of sound. But on this new board build, I want to be able to quickly and easily plug into an amp.
Right.
So I think I'm going to have to make a junction box that lets me bypass the digital amps and kick the wet effects to an effect loop on an amp and have the gain go out to the front of the amp. Or, so 3 options, the normal digital, that
Mhm.
option, but then also a third option that just puts it all in series. If the amp doesn't have an effect loop, I can just run it into the front of the amp
Yeah.
and just click, 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 easy jump between the options. As a complete side note,
Yeah.
something I'm jonesing on right now.
No, I love that idea. I've done some similar board ideas. Usually when I did a digital amp solution, though, I would have a way to insert it into the middle of the chain, and it would never I almost never have a digital solution on my pedal board, because that's just not
Yeah.
that's the exception to my typical gig.
Yeah.
And so it's just a way to add it in at the end. Although, full disclosure for listeners, I bought a Helix floor again, because there's a gig I have that it makes sense, and so that's what I'm doing. And I like the Helix. I've always said I think it sounds great, but it's not the thing that excites me. My freaking Maxon OD9 into an amp. That's what makes me excited to play guitar.
Which is the most important thing, right? Like,
yeah,
whatever you're using, if it inspires you to play, because the crowd really, I mean, unless you're playing in Nashville, right? Like,
yeah, unless you're playing in
the
Nashville,
crowd doesn't know what you're using. They just know if it sounds bad,
Mm-hmm.
So levels of good don't mean the same thing to them. But if something doesn't inspire you to play, then that's a real problem.
That's always been my explanation, or that's always been my counter to the it doesn't matter to the audience what it says. As long as it just needs to sound good. I was like, I know.
Yeah.
The gear I play is for me.
But if you hate using it, it's not.
Yeah.
It's not a good fit. Yeah.
Or if I can't wrap my mind around how to use it properly, and I'm just stumbling over it. Doesn't matter what it sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah. But then, the other side of it is like, my favorite amp that I have right now is a Silverface Twin.
Oh, wow.
And sometimes I just don't want to lug that thing to where I'm playing. Like, that thing is so heavy.
Yeah.
My back can't take it.
It's the equivalent weight of a couple of black holes.
Sometimes that's more inspiring to me, of not having to move it than to use it.
Yeah, I totally get that 100%. One of the things with having the Helix is that I just being able to dial something up and it work quickly, because there was a day last week, and I may still do this maybe next week. I have a spare bedroom that I've cleared out. It's where, like amp cab storage and stuff like that is where that is. And like, I've moved things so there's space on the floor, and I really thought about, I'm going to dismantle both of my pedal boards that I typically keep built, because I don't have a gig for them right now. I'm using the Helix for the one gig I've got right now. So I'm like, I'm going to dismantle my pedal boards, and I'm just going to put all of my pedals and power supplies on the floor, plug the power supplies in and then just start putting things together, and
Yeah.
who knows what I come up with.
Yeah.
And things like the Helix let me do that without
Yeah.
having to take up a 10 by 10 room with a floor full of pedals.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, I think the headphone experience too is way better on that type of thing, like a digital amp, than an amp that has like an aux box or something like that, which is just to play with headphones is just a huge pain of a setup to do.
Agreed.
Compared to like, like I don't want to disturb my family or something, plug into a digital amp, put on headphones. That experience is better, I think.
Yeah. I still can't. Playing with headphones is still a thing for me that I just don't. I hate.
Yeah.
To the point that even when I'm using the Helix, I'm plugging into an FR because I need to hear it.
Yeah.
I need to get over that hurdle. I just need to spend more time
It's
with
different.
headphones.
It is different.
It doesn't feel the same.
Yeah, I'm super used to in-ears at this point, but like it is weird and different, a different experience to get used to.
Yeah, it's taking me a little while.
Yeah.
So Rick, we're getting close to the end of the episode, and we're going to go over to Patreon. Listeners, you know the drill. If you want to hear a little more conversation with Rick, we have no idea what we're going to get into yet. It could be weird. We may talk about NAMM, because as this episode comes out, NAMM is coming up, and it's going to be a big NAMM. Rick, you going to NAMM? Are you going to be there?
I am going to NAMM. Yeah, it's my first time since COVID NAMM.
Oh wow!
So yeah, so it'll be interesting time.
Well, then I'm definitely going to swing by. We'll hang out while I'm out there. But in the meantime, I've started asking a classic question of all my guests when I have them on, because Blake, a good old buddy Blake, he has his classic questions. And I love that concept. I love this idea of asking the same question over and over and over again.
Yeah,
because then I don't have to write new ones, listeners. But I don't care what your favorite pizza is. I mean, I do, but I'm not going to ask that. What I've been asked.
Street Pizza, New York.
Oh, I see.
Boom.
You're calling the legit ones. Like no one can argue with you because
right. If you've never been there, you can't argue.
Exactly. Also, New York.
Yeah.
Yes, there are crap pizza joints in New York.
Yeah.
But if you haven't eaten there, you're just gonna have to assume it's New York pizza. I can't fight it.
I will say I went in very oh my gosh, all New Yorkers talk about is their pizza and like the water and how he makes it the best or whatever. And then we went to Prince Street Pizza at 1 a.m., stood in line for 20 minutes, and it was a pizza square. And I was like, I don't know. And it was just so good.
Oh,
it's
see.
Focaccia pizza.
Oh.
So it's not even New York style pizza or normal pizza dough. It's this focaccia thick. Thinking about it's making my mouth water.
Well, to go with that, I have been asking instead. So I am a bourbon and scotch guy, and so I've been asking people, "What's your favorite cocktail?"
Oh man, I'm super lame on this. I couldn't for health reasons couldn't drink alcohol for most of my adult life.
Oh wow!
Until the last 6 years. So the last 6 years, I've been dipping my toes in. I'm also an annoyingly frugal person. I hate spending money on something.
Yeah.
If I don't know I'm gonna like it, and I'm also just a really picky person. So I'm very slow, but I love a good old fashioned.
Yeah.
I love whiskey. I like more, I guess just hard alcohol more so.
Yeah.
I don't really like beer. Or stuff
Fair.
like that, but I like whiskeys and bourbons and stuff like that. I got to do the I forget the brand, but they're just outside of Nashville. They're one of the big ones. I completely forget. I always want to say Jim something, but it's not Bean, but it's it's one of the other ones. That was super cool. I got there and they were like, all right, I hope you guys are ready for the tour. We're going to be walking this many miles and so much of this is stairs. And I'm like, what did I sign up for? And then it was just the coolest experience. And we did the angel testing room at the end. So they had all these tastes of the different styles of whiskeys and everything like that. which was super cool. Long answer, but like, yeah, pretty much the old fashioned whiskey, anything like that, straight up. I like that.
Nice. I think that's the Jack Daniels tour.
Jack Daniels, yeah.
Yeah, because I've been on that tour.
Yeah, it's super
and it's
cool.
super cool. It is. So when I took it, it was me and an ex of mine. We were doing this big, like, actually New Year's. So it was 19 years ago. It was about this time.
Son of a...
I know, it's God, I'm getting so old. But it was this time 19 years ago. We were doing this big, like, road trip. We drove to Atlanta, drove down to Savannah. We drove up the entire the Atlantic coast and did the Outer Banks of North Carolina.
Nice.
And on the way back, we went through Tennessee and did the Jack Daniels distillery tour. And the guy who gave us the tour was the most perfect Tennessee distillery tour guide you could possibly imagine.
Yeah.
He was like 5'6", with a beard down to his belly button, bald head, denim overalls. Like, he had the shtick down, and not once did I feel like it was a shtick. So if he was, if this wasn't, he came across so incredibly genuine that's just who he was. And I was like, you are perfect, sir.
Yeah.
So
it was. I highly recommend it. I was. Like, me and some friends did like a guys trip, and we flew down for Furnace Fest in Birmingham. Had it super fun there, but I was like, you guys have to go to Nashville. Like, we're so close. So then we took a couple days and we drove, from Birmingham to Nashville, which is only like a couple hours. But on the way, we stopped and did that. And then we spent a couple days in Nashville, and it was like, we were just looking for stuff to do. And it was just so cool. And there was also like a grilled cheese place just outside. Like, it's a different unaffiliated, but like there's a grilled cheese shop that's like best grilled cheese in the world.
Yeah.
It was like amazing. Maybe the best grilled cheese in the world. It was super good. The food in general in the South, like, kind of similar maybe to the pizza. Like, they talk a big shop.
Yeah.
They fully back it up. I live in Washington State. All right. People think they know what barbecue is and like what food is, and they have no idea. It's kind of that, like, ignorance is bliss. They don't know what they're missing out on.
Yeah.
The friends I took were like, oh, like, fried chicken's ruined for us. Like, you ruined it. Like, yeah.
So I had that typical upbringing where my mom worked full time. My mom was an incredible Lebanese cook. So, but what she didn't do was like fried chicken, and like she did learn to make really great cornbread and stuff like that. But I was, had a babysitter, took care of us after school, and she would make us fried chicken. And I do not really eat fried chicken now because it doesn't touch that.
Yeah.
Like made in like, and I'm a big believer in this. Listeners, you didn't come here for the food portion of the show, but you're here for it anyway.
It's happening.
There is a magic to fried chicken made by one that somebody knows how to season chicken.
Yeah.
And two, they fry it in cast iron skillets that have been used for 100 years to fry chicken.
Yeah.
Like, it's a whole thing. And my mom passed in 2020, and I have inherited those cast iron skillets, and so they're going to start getting used here eventually. So I don't do a lot of cooking at home, but it's going to happen.
Chicken. I mean, that's a good thing to get started on. That's
I need
like
to eat a little less fried chicken or a little fried foods.
My favorite thing when I travel is I find chicken and I find French fries. And
really?
Try to find the best of both. And those two, and then donuts. That's all my other thing is like donuts, and then kind of the breakfast and lunch and dinner type thing. And so my favorite chicken place is Bolton's in Nashville.
I love Bolton's.
Just so good. It's
I'm a dyed-in-the-wool Prince's. Like, Prince's is my favorite in Nashville, but Bolton's is really good.
Really, any of those ones that come up as like the top 5, they're all great.
Yeah.
Bolton's is amazing though. Bolton's is that type of place that you're going to walk in and you're like, should I be in here? It's very hole in the wall, it's very tiny little place in this corner kind of, but it's just so good. And they have a sign. They have a sign that says "Wash your hands before you touch your baby." You know, like
Yes.
it's the best place ever.
Well, and that's what old school Princes used to be before, someone decided to drive their vehicle into it and they had to
Yeah.
rebuild. And now there's like this open air, like mall food court
Yeah.
thing in Nashville, and there's a Prince's in there. And it's
like
don't
a
get me
food
wrong,
truck.
it's still fine, but you lose
Yeah.
all of the character
Yeah.
because it feels so yuppie.
Yeah.
But Bolton's is super, super real and authentic. And I tell people Hattie B's is even okay, but you're gonna have to up the heat. When you go there, you're gonna have to get a little hotter chicken.
Yeah, Bolton's, I get the mild.
Yeah.
Like I get the mild and I'm dying. Like the last time I was there, I think like the locals were coming in to get their chicken and they were like laughing at me because I was just like, I'm a sweater. I get the meat sweats when I eat. And I was just like dying. And they're like, oh, what heat level did you get? And I was like, I'm just on mild,
They mean it though. That mild means it.
Yeah.
That's for Prince's. For the first time I ever got it, I got a mild. And I was like, oh, I can handle this. This is fine. And then progressively over the years of going to Nashville, I've gone up now out of 7 because they have 7 scale degrees.
Yeah, they have a lot.
I do like 4 or 5 depending on how I'm feeling. 5 is when I'm like, I want to feel the pain. Like bring it. I cannot fathom the people that eat 7.
7 is the tourist, right? Like, I feel like the people who live there, they're not getting 7 every week. You know? It's fun that it's on there, and it's fun as a tourist to like get that hot level. It's the same at like Hattie B's, shut the cluck up.
Yes, level, exactly.
I will say I have an amazing story that my friend would hate for me to tell, which is on that trip. We spent some time in Nashville, so I was like, guys, let me show you chicken. And we did a chicken crawl. So we kept going to different chicken places, trying the different chicken. We finally went to Bolton's, and they got the hottest level, because they wanted to experience the hottest level. I was like, great, awesome. We sweated it out. We had a good time. Then we went to leave, and my buddy was like, oh, I'll meet you guys in the car. And I was like, great. I got in the front passenger seat, waited. He was going to hit the bathroom. So he comes out, and I will never forget him getting in the front seat, grabbing the steering wheel and seeing his eyes go wide and him going, oh no. And I thought maybe he was having a digestive issue or something, but no, he forgot to wash his hands before he went.
Rookie mistake.
Yeah, rookie mistake, which I was dying laughing. I was like, I love you, dude, but I'm going to make fun of you for this for a long time. Cut to like the next most panicked 20 minutes trying to help him out. But that was wash your hands before you go, guys.
Great advice if you get to Nashville and get to hot chicken. Well, Rick, thanks for coming on. We're going to go over to Patreon. I sure appreciate it. Good. Down below, listeners, there are all the links as usual, so you can find Matthew's effects and Rick and all the places that I can track him down on. So we'll catch you over on Patreon, you Patreon supporters. And if you're not a Patreon supporter, we'll catch you next week. And remember, be good to yourselves, be kind to each other, and make some noise.